So, hey guys, this is
Hello.
a very unique episode of We Heart Our Lives. It's the first one of WHOL Sessions, which we've decided to take our online recorded episodes and make it a live interactive correspondent with healthcare professionals like these very amazing two Black men. I also have my counterpart, Gideon Monccrief here, who is one of our We Heart Our Lives producers. And as a Black man, I thought his voice was very important to have on this panel as well. During today's episode, I really want us to focus on encouraging more Black men to seek and reach out for the help that they need, and that it's okay, that it's no longer such a taboo topic to talk about, to seek out. And before we jump into I would love for you guys to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit of what you do and what your focus is. Gideon, I'll start with you, and then we'll go on to Jarell and Nels.
So, as Nicole said, my name is Gideon Moncreiffe. I'm a production guru, for better terms. I connect people of color in the entertainment and media industry and just help them get really great people of color to work within their various productions. That is my life job, my 9 to 5. I work for American Express, and I'm in charge of the digital and event productions that they have for the C-suite.
Awesome. Jarell, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us what you do, what your focus is.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Jarell Myers. I'm a clinical psychologist here in the Tri-State area. My specialty is in anxiety, depression, and substance use disorders. I received my training at Fairleigh Dickinson University, completed an internship at then Mount Sinai St. Luke's Hospital, I believe it's called Mount Sinai West now, and then did a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship at New York Presbyterian's Westchester Division. My experience has allowed me to conduct training in Harlem and in Mount Vernon. And so I've had the opportunity to work with people who look like me. And unfortunately, that hasn't been in the majority. So I'm happy to be here to kind of talk more about that and see how we can get more and more people who look like us in my office and in the offices of people who look like us as well.
Yes, love that. Nas, please.
Okay, so just like you said earlier, my full name is Chinasokwu Nworu. Everyone calls me Nas. I'm an occupational therapist in New York. I currently live in Brooklyn. I work for the New York City Department of Education, and I service kids that are, on the spectrum, kids that have ADHD, kids that, have motor planning issues, like the whole gamut, you name it, that's what I do. I also run a business called OT Can, and it's also another occupational therapy, type of business, and it's centered around early intervention and home health care, where I go to homes, mainly within the Bed-Stuy, East New York area, and give OT, give therapy to not only babies, but all the way up to the geriatric population, grandmothers, grandparents, with COVID, with coronavirus, kind of taking over the world right now. I'm not doing that per se in regards to going into homes, but I'm doing telehealth and teletherapy, which has been interesting to say the least, but it's a lot better now. And then lastly, I'm a co-founder of a company named PVOGlobal. PVO stands for Positive Vibes Only. And it's a company that was birthed out of mental health, actually. Hopefully I can give you the backstory later, but, we're a global lifestyle event company. And our main business was events prior to COVID. We would have events all over the world, Ghana, LA, New York, anywhere from 1,000 plus people. It was a beautiful thing. And it was centered around positivity, right? But like now we're pivoting into doing podcasts, doing, like putting out digital content, but hopefully, when everything returns, we'll go back to those live events. But as of right now, just like you're doing, we're pivoting and shifting, and the train must go on, right?
So it must go on. And with that said, I know we're experiencing unprecedented times, especially when it comes to mass trauma, right? And going through something together. And if there's anything that we've learned over the past is that the Black community has more experience in mass trauma than anybody else have had. I feel like, well, I won't exclude any other races that have gone through the same kind of like collective trauma. But before we delve in and break down these the things that kind of filtrate into that, I want Jarell first with you to define what you think the definition of mass trauma is.
So let's start with just trauma on a whole, right? It is a severe sort of psychological experience that someone goes through. It's an event that has happened that has distressed a person. It is one in which it's very difficult. It can be difficult to recover from that because of what the event has meant to the person, how the event has occurred, and as well as the current situation that that person may be in. And so it affects the way that they're functioning moving forward. You'll find that there may be anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, among other things that may be occurring, right?
Right.
That is limited to the individual when we're talking about a traumatic event, right? When we're thinking about mass trauma, we want to take that to a macro level. So you're thinking about multiple people, communities, towns, cities, etc., that are experiencing a very similar event, distressing event, occurring, affecting each of those individuals in different ways within the community. And so that could mean that people within those towns or communities are experiencing the symptoms I was talking about earlier. They could have coping skills that help them to effectively deal with it. But when we're talking about mass trauma, we're talking about significant distressing events that are occurring amongst a large group of people.
Amazing. It's very interesting. Like, do you always find, just a small follow-up question before I move to you, Naz, do you find that people's responses to that traumatic event that everybody is affected by tend to differ sometimes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's dependent on several things, right? So in any situation that we're walking into, like us walking into this conversation that we're having today, we're not just walking in as a blank slate. We're bringing stuff in with us. So each of us have had a day, right? Something has happened throughout the day, right? And whether it's affected us negatively, positively, or from a more neutral point of view, we are bringing that in with us, right? So I may have come in a really good mood. Gideon may have come in feeling sad. Nas may have come in feeling angry, right? And that's going to affect how the conversation goes as we move forward, right? It's very similar when we're talking about how we're reacting to a distressing or a traumatic event. If going into that event, you have a history of traumas occurring throughout your childhood or throughout your life, then your reaction to that is going to be much more severe than perhaps someone who has never had any of those experiences. And even within that subset, the people who have never had those experiences, it's dependent on their stress level. It's dependent on how well they're able to cope with things, etc. So for a broad range of people, they may be reacting to a traumatic event differently. There's no wrong or right way for reacting to a traumatic event. My belief is that people sort of are doing the best that they can with whatever skill set they have, and they may need more adaptive skills in order to deal with things, but this is their body's natural reaction to something that has stressed them significantly.
Gotcha. That's amazing. That's a great breakdown. Naz, do you have anything to add to the definition of mass trauma?
Yeah, that was a beautiful breakdown, beautiful definition. I don't have anything to add to the definition, but as he was talking, I was writing down a list of word associations that I, could think of, when the word trauma is mentioned. And those words, a lot of them are names. Names such as Emmett Till, in regards to mass trauma, right? Names such as Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery. These are instances that occur that not only affects, the individual, murdered, but in addition to their families, but, the whole culture, like our whole race at large, at the Central Park Five, right? So it's like, when these things occur, I feel like it's happening to me. or happening to, you know, a close friend or a brother, because, you know, they look just like me. And 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, they're not doing anything to break the law. Like, they're just being themselves. They're just being black, right? And they're getting gunned down. Like, the most recent case is Ahmed, just jogging. And he got gunned down. And I jog often, you know? So it's like, that's what comes to mind when I hear mass trauma. And it's interesting the way I individualize it, or the way, I guess, to kind of step away from the mass word and make it into a micro level thing is, you know, I'll tell a story. At the time Eric Garner got killed, I was at NYU, and within my program, you know, of course, only black guy within the whole program. And, you know, I just remember hearing the story and then having to go to the class the next day, extremely mad, right? And you know, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. You know, I am doing everything prior to the next day and talking to all my friends about it. But when I get to class the next day, I'm in a program of like 50, 60 people that don't look like me, and I'm the only one that wants to talk about it, or I'm the only one thinking about it. Like, to everyone else, it's a regular Tuesday, but in my world, it's like, what the, you know, excuse my language, but
yeah, no, you touch on a very amazing, like an important point, because it's one of the things that I wanted to discuss too, is like, can we more productively communicate the pain that we're experiencing during these kind of like triggering moments during our cultural, you know, lineage, to other groups of individuals that feel like we don't necessarily feel like they can resonate with our pain. You know, like, we see something different and we almost sometimes become desensitized because it's such an exhausting thing to have. So I want to understand, and I'll go back to you, Jarell, first, to comment on what Nas just said, as far as like, how can we better position ourselves, because it all starts with us, right? Like, we can't fix the world. So how can we not wake up angry, not be so, you know, overwhelmed with the trauma that we're feeling, but we can communicate that better, and therefore be able to heal a lot easier, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it starts with the awareness, because awareness breeds solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I have an understanding of what's going on with me, so in your case, Nas, you acknowledge that you were feeling angry, right?
mm-hmm.
And you're totally entitled to feeling that about a situation that feels anger-inducing for you, right? But what is at the core of that anger? Is it that this is a man, this feels like an injustice done to a man? Is it that this man looks like me and I feel afraid that this could happen to me? Could it be something completely different? Is it a mixture of all those things, right? If I'm just walking up to you and I'm saying, hey, Nicole, I'm mad about something. I can't provide a solution, or I can't provide the specifics about what I'm mad about. You can try to comfort me. You can try to be there for me, but you're not going to understand how best to help me. Mm-hmm. The more that I can communicate about what's going on with me through my own awareness is a way in which I can start to breed solutions, right? Mm-hmm. Just because we look alike doesn't mean that we think alike, doesn't mean that we understand things in the exact same way. We all operate differently, right? And so your anger may be different from Gideon's anger, may be different from Nicole's anger, may be different from my anger, right? And we may be expressing it the exact same way, but understanding what it is that we're angry about may be different. And if we can begin to express that, right, then we can begin to garner support within the community around that, right? Until we get to that point, though, we're going to be stuck in this phase where we're focused on the emotion that we're experiencing and not really dealing with what may be underlying, right? And that's the thing that's eating away at us, right? If I can't express that I'm feeling angry about Eric Garner because it felt like another instance of people overstepping their boundaries and getting away with it. If I can't express that, if I can't say that to people, and all I can say is that I'm angry or that I'm mad, then that continues to eat away at me. I'm not inducing the healing process, right? But it has to happen, and it has to happen within our community. The problem is that we don't focus on that, right? And I'm not talking about within our community. I'm talking about as people, as human beings. We don't focus on that because there isn't that level of introspection, right? We're accustomed to avoiding that level of introspection because it's deep and it's dark, and there are a lot of things down there that we don't necessarily understand. The more that we're willing to sort of open up to that is the more that we can begin to communicate about what's going on with us, right? But there has to be support set up within our systems, within our communities, and systems that allow us to have the opportunity to talk about those things. And the other piece is that it's coming from a non-judgmental place, right? I have to be able to feel comfortable sitting down with you and talking to you about how I'm feeling and what's going on with me without feeling as if I'm in competition with you, without feeling as if the way that I'm feeling isn't as bad as I should be feeling, but more so that you are understanding that how I'm feeling is valid and it's relevant and it's meaningful. We don't have enough of that.
Absolutely.
And until we get to a place where that's more commonplace, we're going to continue falling into the cycle, just reacting to the emotions that we're experiencing.
Just real quick, I would like to add that was actually extremely therapeutic for me, number one. And number two, the one regret I do have, going back to that time period, was not seeking counseling, not seeking help. But you touched upon it. There has to be trust in place, right? There has to be some type of support. There was nobody I really trusted, within that time frame. So, but now, like, I would actively seek, because I know there's Black therapists, Black counselors out there. There's Black, or they don't even have to be Black. Just someone that I could talk to about that issue and help me unpack my anger. So counseling is huge. Thank you.
Before I go on to ask a follow-up question to you, Jarell, Gideon, I know you've had your own process with seeking help and understanding that this pain is deeply rooted. Do you want to chime in on letting us understand like what you went through as just a layman and not as a mental health expert at this point in time?
Yeah. So for me, me and Nicole have been talking about this for a couple of weeks. I go to therapy every Friday. So I have my therapist, specifically a Black male. And I thought it was important for that to happen because I know when I've done therapy in the past, when you have a therapist and you're a Black man or a Black woman, a lot of your therapy time is spent just breaking things down about why you feel a certain way or certain vernacular, why when this happened, you reacted this way. When you have someone who's been through the same traumas or the same experiences that you've been through, I think you get a lot more bang for your buck with therapy. And, to both of you said, so Nas, that happens all the time where you are the only person in the room and you feel like you cannot express yourself because you as a Black man will come off angry. You as a Black man will come off loud. You as a Black man will come off, as violent. And again, you will be demonized for being who you truly are. You can't be sad while being Black. You can't jog while being Black. You can't cry while being Black. You can't sleep in your bed while being Black. You can't make love at night in your bed while being Black. You can't get Skittles. You can't just breathe. And I think Sterling K. Brown said it best in his message he posted a couple of weeks ago when he did the correlation between COVID and wearing a mask and how the Black man and the Black woman have to wear a mask all the time. And when he went on his run for Ahmaud, he was talking about how I wore my mask, even though it was hard for me to breathe, I wore my mask because I needed to connect with Ahmaud. I needed to really feel what he felt in his last few seconds of life. And it's like, when I took my mask off, I could breathe again. I could breathe easy. But as a Black man, I still have to wear this mask to make everyone around me feel comfortable.
That was deep.
Yeah, and heavy, I want to follow up and go back to what you said, Jarell, is that, in order for us to heal with all these emotions and things that we're feeling and going through, there needs to be systems in place, right? But before we get to the systems aspect of things, we also talked about that there are certain things that we have to align and be aware of why we're feeling the way that we're feeling. It's probably not just anger. It's just my interpretation of that deeper feeling that we never talk about, so we never get to the root issue of things, right? So you mentioned fear. is, you know, like we mentioned, worthiness, right? Like, what is my Black body worth if I could be shot like a dog on the street, right? And then we just mentioned generational too, right? Like something that comes from it. So I want you to tap into those attributes that could possibly be the manifestation of this mass trauma, or the triggers that come about, and then in what way, outside of just therapeutical seeking therapy and having these conversations, what systems could be put into place for us all to kind of grow and heal?
Yeah, so that's, I'll say out the bat, that's a complex, it's going to require a complex answer, right?
Of course.
So if first and foremost, before going anywhere else, right? African Americans, people of Afro-Caribbean, or people in general of African descent, have endured trauma since coming to the New World, right? We were our ancestors were violently taken from Africa and brought over here, not for positive reasons, but to be used as tools. And that is how we were sort of perceived and used, right? That's how our ancestors were used. We were not seen as human beings, right? Slavery ends, and there's no period of time where healing can take place from that, right? We're hit with thing after thing after thing, where it's almost as if we're reliving the traumas that our ancestors experienced, right? To this day, I don't think there's been a point in time where people of African descent living in America have been given the opportunity to deal with all of that, right? If you fell off your bike while you were riding when you were younger, right, and scratched your arm, you'd run to your mom would put some ointment on it, she'd bandage it up, kiss it, make it better, right? The problem that we've had is that we've never allowed our wounds to heal. We've never been allowed the opportunity for our wounds to heal. So we're here and we keep getting cut in different ways, right? So we keep getting cut and we're asked to continue running our race, continue moving along on our journey, as if we are operating at the same functional level as everyone else. You spoke about generational, right? And I don't think I mentioned it, but in talking about slavery, right, there is the idea that traumas get passed down through generations, right?
I agree.
In my opinion, I think that happens because when we're growing, we are observing the world around us as a means of understanding how we're supposed to operate in the world, right? If your great-grandmother saw her mother operating a certain way, she would take that to be gospel, that that's the way that I'm supposed to operate. And especially if she's seeing people in the community operate in the same way, then she's going to take that as gospel. Thing is, that continues to get passed down throughout generations, and you may not even know why you're acting the way that you're acting, but that is gospel for you because that's your understanding of how the world is supposed to work. We don't understand that because we haven't been allowed to heal, that because we're dealing with constant trauma after trauma on a regular basis, that our experience, what we have come to know as normal, is not normal. It is not common. It's not the way that our body is supposed to operate, right? We are, I would guess, I don't know for sure, but I would guess that we are operating at such a high level of stress constantly that the way that our body is meant to function isn't happening right now. So in anxiety, we talk about the fight, flight, or freeze response, the way in which we react to something that's making us feel anxious, right? It's our body being amped up and prepared to do something, right? We are constantly operating at that level. We're not supposed to be. It's supposed to happen in short bursts, right? So when the big Rottweiler is running after us, we're supposed to get into that mode. And the moment we're safe, we're out of that mode. we're relieved. But if there are constant traumas that are happening time after time and we're not recovering from it, the way in which we're operating now is we're hypervigilant. We're looking out for the next thing to occur, right? We're not at a place where we're just sort of sitting and are at calm, right? There has to be first an awareness of that occurring. And I don't think there's any education of that happening at all, right? Because I don't think people are thinking about that. That's one, right? So there needs to be an education within our communities that this is what is happening to us constantly, and this is not normal. It's not supposed to be happening. Secondly, when we're talking about building systems, right, we're talking about, if it's not seeing someone like me, we're talking about structures within the community that are either already established or can be established, that are trust centers for us, right? So you can talk about community centers, you can talk about churches, whatever it is, but within those trust centers, establishing places where we can actually go and deal with that stuff, with people who have been trained to address it, right? I said earlier that we all deal with trauma differently. So the expectation is that people are going to be coming in at different levels. You can't expect that someone who's 70, 75 years old and has seen whatever they've seen through their lifetime to be operating or acting the same way as a 20-year-old who has just begun life but is operating in this way, right? So we have to be willing to sort of deal with the diversity and the variety that exists within our community as it relates to how we're displaying our traumatic responses, right? It's I want to say grandiose. I want to say it feels at times for me that it's not going to happen, but these are the sort of things that have to occur for change to happen within our communities, right? There has to be we have to build a level of trust with one another to be able to share with one another. That doesn't mean that I know you personally and intimately, but what it means is that I trust that you have my best interest at heart and that you're willing to listen to me and help me heal, just as I'm willing to listen to you and help you heal.
Absolutely. Nas, I want to take it to you and hear your perspective or understanding of how you find that trauma, suicide, and depression has shown up in Black men slightly different, similar to what Jarell was just talking about, like that we all show up differently based on our backgrounds and what we're exposed to and where we are in our lives. How do you think specifically for Black men, those attributes show up, specifically depression and suicide?
Well, I think everything works hand in hand. I think it's kind of like, if I could paint a visual representation of it, it's like a web, and the web starts from what, the young brother was just saying earlier in regards to this hypervigilance, right? This hypervigilant state of mind that started all the way back from slavery, right? And even because back during slavery, we were considered property, correct? And even after that, we weren't even considered a full human being. Like, I think we were considered 1/4 of it, of 3/5 or something. Like, we weren't considered a full human, right? So like, they've never really valued us, and because of that, we've never really valued ourselves. And exactly, and that's a whole other topic that I could discuss. But just moving forward from that, that hypervigilance is interesting in regards to trauma being passed down from generation to generation. Because think about it, if grandma who lived during the civil rights time and saw all of that stuff and had to live a certain way is currently raising their granddaughter, right, or their grandbaby in today's age, they have this hypervigilant vibe or exactly, they have this hypervigilance that they garner or that they exude, and that potentially is being transferred to the baby. So this hypervigilance, and as babies, what we become is through learned behavior, just like he said earlier. You know, we learn from what we see, we learn from what we feel. And I'm just saying that.
And do you think that hypervigilance is, or, you know, just that state in itself is passed on, especially to Black men when they are young little boys? And then in what regard do you see that affecting them later as men? Because they're always told to be strong, don't cry, and you have to, you know, like X, Y, and Z. We know attributes that come from it. Like, what are the results of that as a Black man now?
See,
sorry, go ahead.
See, that's the surface level. So what I just mentioned is like subconscious trauma being passed down. It's like you don't even know, grandma doesn't know, mom doesn't know that she's passing down this hyper vigilant type of behavior or activity, or still, that's subconscious. But what you just said is the surface level, where, you know, we're told, oh, man up, you know, you're a boy, boys don't cry, you know, you got to be, you know, you're Black, you can't do this, you can't do that. Right. So it's like a combination of both subconscious and conscious, you know, that's not allowing us to really show our emotions. And we end up growing up to be, you know, hyper masculine. Right. And having fragile egos, and it just leads to this toxic behavior, you know. So, but to go back to answer your question, like I kind of feel like I did, you know, in regards to depression and suicide, which is the rate is extremely high in Black men. It's like we can't really be ourselves, or we don't even know how to be ourselves, you know, at that certain age. And because of that, we live in a constant state of depression, you know, which kind of leads.
Before you continue, elaborate on that. Why do you feel that you cannot be yourselves as a Black man?
We can't be ourselves because the perception of the Black man is, you know, we have to live up to our perception, right? What society perceives. And through mass media, like, our perception has been, you know, hyper vigilant, you know, loud, like ignorant, strong. There's so many things, like everything but sensitive. You cannot be sensitive. You cannot show your feelings. You can't even like have a conversation in regards to, you know, not winning. You know, it's hard for a group of men to get together, which is sad, and talk about how they had a bad day, right? Without the fear of being judged. And so because of that, we don't have those conversations, and all of these things are just being held up within you. And it's like a volcano, you know, it's like every given, it's going to blow. You're going to erupt eventually. And unfortunately that eruption looks like depression and suicide, or, you know, or domestic abuse, or so on and so forth.
Gideon, I want to ask you how your perspective has been as Black men, you know, piggybacking on what Nas just said, like not feeling yourself. And then Jarell, I want you, because I don't want to forget, I'll let you finish, Gideon, and then I'll jump on, because it was such a good string of things that you just said, Nas. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Gideon.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I feel the same, you know, except for the instance that I feel like there are certain groups of men that will allow you to talk to each other and express with each other, but it's not in large groups. And I think, especially what you said, like our whole lives, we're taught to survive. We're taught to be strong, be this, but don't be that way when you're in the presence of a white woman, or don't be that way when you're in the presence of the police. Like, we can never just truly be oneself. We have to be 3 or 4 different people throughout the day. And that's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when we're young, you just want to have fun. You just want to play, laugh, run around, sweat, come in, get something to drink, repeat. And when we do those things as kids, the simplest things we do as kids can be taken by the police as an act of aggression. You know, I used to play cops and robbers when I was a kid by myself. Tamir Rice got killed for it. So it's like, you know, we can't do simple things in life. And then when we do them and we get to a certain point in life, and it keeps happening. My first interaction with the police, I think I was like 5 or 6 years old. Me and my brother were having a snowball fight, and one of the snowballs accidentally hit a parked car, and it just happened to be a undercover police officer, and they chased us down and threw us up against the fence with guns drawn at the age of 5, 6.
Wow.
Like stuff like this has continued, for me throughout my life. I remember when I was in high school, me and my brother were having breakfast at Friendly's. Someone in the restaurant called and said, "Hey, they're robbing Friendly's." And as we were exiting, 20 cop cars rolled up with their guns drawn, asking, "Where's the guns? Where did you guys steal?" And we just finished eating breakfast. A white friend of my brother came out and said they didn't do anything, our waitress, and just said they were just having breakfast. They didn't do anything. And we were questioned, "Why are you here? Why are you eating here? Do you live in this town?" And then followed us home. So there are things like that happen throughout your life, even into my 30s. Leaving work from a company function in a black car service and being pulled over by the police and being told, "Hey," not asking me, but asking the driver, "Are you okay?" And the driver being like, "What are you talking about? Are you okay? Is he trying to rob you?"
What?
Because I'm in Brooklyn in a neighborhood where a black guy like me shouldn't be in a black car dressed in a suit. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They pulled me out, searched me to make sure that he was okay. And then my driver started crying after the fact and saying, "I am so sorry, Indian brother." And he was like, "I don't understand why they do this." And I was like, "It's okay. I do. I just want to go home." So it's things like that, and these things that constantly happen. And when you tell your white counterparts or your white friends, they don't believe you. Like, "No, that doesn't happen. This is 2000 whatever. This doesn't happen." But then you look back, even in there was a documentary called Rosedale, The Way It Is, and it were kids that moved there from out of boroughs into this really nice town in Rosedale, and this was in 1979, and white people were bombing Black Caribbean people's homes to get them to not move into the neighborhood. And they said they were afraid of Blacks moving in because they were violent, they were drug dealers, but they were the one causing the crime. Same thing in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Wow.
Anytime we get something together and we're doing something positive as a people, you get shut down, whether it's through the government, whether it's through people that are supposed to be in your community, you get shut down. But to answer back on what Jeffrey and Nas were saying when we first started, I don't think we can talk to everyone yet because people still don't see us as fully human.
Yeah.
Until they, I don't want to say until they have the same experience as us, but until they start to empathize and say, "Hey, that could happen to my own son or my own daughter. How would I feel if a police officer did that to my son or my daughter?" Or, the same way when little Black girls are running at the beach or having a confrontation with the police, they get thrown to the concrete and body slam. If a white young lady does the same thing, they just get sat down and, "What are you doing?" They get a stern talking to. But it's like we're perceived to be overly strong, overly sexualized, overly. Where does this all come back from? From slavery. We were overly sexualized then. Our women were used for play toys and to get a nut off. We were used to plow the fields and do all the work for free. But we were trained, and our bodies were trained to be overly strong. And that's what it became. And that's how they still see us. And until all of those people die off, I don't see much changing.
I don't think that's a solution, but because it's not like we mentioned, like it gets passed on, so there's not really an end. But thank you for that, Gideon. It's really heavy stuff, man.
Yeah.
Super. I'm so sad for you. Like for all of us that we have to battle against this and figure out a way. Jarell, I was going to ask, how do you think we as a race can regain our own value when it's constantly challenged, like Gideon just explained and discussed?
So I think it honestly it starts within our own communities. I think that the way that things have sort of been portrayed in society is, well, at least let me start here. America is a me first society, right? And the solution to our issues are we solution. It's very hard to come up with a we solution in a me society, right? Because the messages that are being sent are that you need to be taken care of first. right? As opposed to us working together to take care of us, right? If we're to change our own perception of ourselves, because there's no way that you can change your perception of anyone else. We don't have control over anyone else's behavior. We can work as hard as we possibly can, but if someone has a certain perception of us, they're going to have that perception, right? If they change, it's going to be on them, not on us, right? But to change our own perception within our own community and to begin to help ourselves and to begin to be the force of change that we want to see, it requires us. So it requires conversations like this, and it requires people like us reaching out to each other and reaching back into our communities, right? It's not just about me going to college, getting my degree, and doing well for myself. It's about me doing all of that, but then going back to where I'm coming from and helping out those communities, right? It's about using the resources that I gained from college. So I'm not necessarily talking just from a monetary point of view. I'm talking about the skills and the knowledge that I've gained and using that and rebuilding in my community, right? Until we can do that type of thing, we're going to have a very hard time sort of changing the way that we see ourselves, right? Because the message that we are getting from the outside society is not blocked by anything else, right? If we are if we're to sort of change our own perception, it requires us blocking out those messages and rerouting it so that there are new messages being placed within our community, right? I remember like this McDonald's commercial from way back when. I don't remember it perfectly, but it was like, I don't remember the dude's name, but say his name was Mikey. It's like, Mikey got a job at McDonald's and everybody's proud of him and like shouting him out and all of that, right? That's the type of thing that we need, that every step that we're taking moving forward is celebrated, right? That every, like, if we're being a true we first community, then your win is our win, right? And you achieving is us achieving. You doing well is all of us doing well, right? And if we're all moving in that direction, if we're all of a similar mindset that I want Nicole to win, to become a doctor, right? So she can start working at hospitals, right? And so she can then come and get back in our community center to help us out. Then I know that I can be taken care of. So when I go to school, I'm not worried about how I'm feeling. I'm worried about getting my education so I can go out and be a lawyer and come back into the same community center and defend the people who need defending, right? But until we get to that place, it's going to be very hard for us to change our own perception. I think, though, that through like social media, it has its negatives, but I like there are messages out there where we're calling ourselves kings and queens, where we're celebrating each of our achievements, right? Where we're talking about each other, right? Where we're defending each other. So I think the ability for that is there, but it's going to take a much more concentrated effort for us to get to that place. It has to be we're of the same mindset and we're making the decision that this is what we're going to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I wanted to touch on next is this notion of self-medicating because we're avoiding, the wounds that we're experiencing and the lack of care that we take for ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about that, Jarell and Naz, about self-medication in our community?
To be honest, I don't even think we know we're doing it. I think that when I spoke first about awareness being a part of breeding the solution, we're not even aware what we're self-medicating. We're not aware that we are self-medicating. I think what we think is happening is just like, this is my personality. This is how I am. This is totally recreational and serves no other purpose, right? Because there isn't a level of understanding of what's going on deep down under, right? The problem is I wouldn't be able to put statistics on that because, and this is a totally different issue, but there's no research on our community. We don't know what's going on. We don't have the numbers, right? I did prior to this conversation, just sort of a scholarly search on studies done with African-American men and depression. Over a 25-year span, there were 19 studies done that included African-American male depression. And there was only one out of that 19 that actually focus only solely on African American men, right? And we're talking about a small subset of African American men because we're talking about like 25 to 30. We're not talking about the kids. We're not talking about the older generation. We're talking about within that subset, right? So we don't like there isn't any research on us. We don't know what's going on, and so it's as if it's this black box that's unopened. We don't know what's inside. We have no clue of what's going on, right? So ask somebody about self-medication. They're not even going to know what you're talking about. They're going to say that they're just doing it for fun, or this is just what they do, not realizing that there's an engine that's driving that to happen. Because if they don't, there's something deep down that's painful that they have to deal with on a regular basis, and they don't even know what that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those numbers are shocking. It's just, I don't even know, like to your point, you know, it feels unattainable to find a remedy.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah. Naz, have you come across, especially working for New York State Health Department, across any kind of experience that can kind of like piggyback of what Jarell just shared?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with Jarell. It just stems with lack of awareness. Like when you don't know that self-medication, you know, you're actually hurting yourself. You're going to continue to do it, especially when it feels good, right? Like you're not educated in regards to healthy alternatives, you know, and a couple of them are like meditation or exercising, you know, counseling. These are healthy alternatives that you could kind of turn to when you're not feeling your best. But we don't know about this stuff, you know, and number one, and number two, within our community for the longest has been shunned upon, right? It's only now, like, you know, people that we look up to, like the NBA players or celebrities, are coming out, you know, that look like us, are saying like, look, you know, I'm dealing with mental health issues, and I'm seeking counseling, and I'm seeking therapy. And then, you know, people like yourself are putting together, you know, amazing events like this, you know, to showcase like, look, you're fine. You know, we're all dealing with stuff. It's okay to talk to someone, you know, it's okay to go to therapy. It's okay to do meditation and so on and so forth. Self-medicating is bad. Like, so we're now creating the new normal, hopefully, you know? So,
yeah.
You know, so those are just some of the points. And, you know, just to kind of give a story, the reason why I could have worked within any borough. You know, I could have worked in Manhattan, I could have worked, you know, even in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, so on and so forth. But I chose to work in like the East New York areas, you know, Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, because I know that's where our people are, right? That's where my people are, number one. And number two, like, there's not that many Black occupational therapists, you know, doing what I'm doing, you know, doing early intervention and home health care. And if they are doing it, like, you know, the non-Black ones, they're not working in those areas. So a lot of the families go unserviced because, you know, number one, you know, the therapists don't want to go to those areas because they're dangerous, you know, or number two, like they don't, you know, they just, if they do get service, it's horrible. You know, it's not like they don't care. People don't care. So that's why I chose those areas. And I'll become not only their OT, but I'll get in contact with the city, get in contact with the state, you know, and say, hey, you know, why, like, first off, the resources aren't being allocated equally, you know, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah,
you know, so like, I'm like, why is all these resources going to Manhattan or you know, Brooklyn, Williamsburg, but not reaching, you know, East New York or Brownsville? So like, I would have to do the paperwork. Mind you, I'm not getting paid to do all this extra paperwork. However, I feel like it's my, you know, social, it's just something that I feel like I'm obligated to do because I've reached a certain point in my life, and I just want to help out people that look like me. So as I'm doing that, I'm also educating and paying it forward, and you know, just trying to help as much as possible. So, you know, that's my battle.
Absolutely. You know, I think one thing that it's a little heartbreaking because in our community, not only do we self-medicate and avoid therapy because it's frowned upon or taboo, and, you know, it's a stigma attached to it, but it's also a lot of our community is deeply rooted in religion. And, you know, mental health has been for a long time demonized, you know, and it's like, or it's minimized even to the point of like, well, go pray and it will go away, you know, like, you know, just give it all to God and we'll be fine. But all of that, those are obviously great anchors to have. But if we don't understand what's really going on with us, how can we really deal with the issue if we think we can just, you know, shove it in a corner or pray it away, you know, keep drinking, keep smoking, whatever it is. So I want to understand, right, what advice do you guys have for us to be able to advocate for ourselves within our families and in our communities to say like, hey, I know, I understand, I love God too, I'll pray. And, you know, like, all this is great, but I really need to talk and I really need to look at this without sounding whiny or needy or anything like that. And yeah, pretty much like, how can we advocate for ourselves, and like, what are some of the tools that you can provide for some of the people in our community?
Yeah. So the problem with mental illness, right? And I don't even like using those words, but the problem with it is that it's invisible, right? You can't see it unless you're observing the behaviors that the person is exhibiting, right? If an elder in our community were to fall ill, right? There's an understanding that there are certain needs that are required, right? And so the church in the community may offer money to help that person with the medical bills. There may be volunteers who will take her to her appointments. There are folks who will be tasked with providing food to ensure that the elder has enough food in the fridge, right? There's a recognition that yes, she's a member of our community, she's a member of our church, and we want to pray her through, but that action has to take place as well. It's very similar when we're talking about mental illness, right? What we're talking about is, yes, you can absolutely pray and hope that God will be helpful in this situation. However, you don't have to just stop there. There are resources available to help you, right? So it's funny because when I was working in Harlem, a lot of the kids that I was seeing, they were coming in off of the recommendation of the schools that they were in because they were seen unidimensionally, like they're bad kids, not seeing what's underneath the surface, not seeing how they may have been affected by what was going on at home or what was going on in their neighborhood. They're just bad kids who are acting out in the classroom, and the teachers couldn't take them, so they had to come and see me before going back into school, right? Which makes no sense, right? Because we don't do things as human beings. We don't do things just for doing them sake, right? We're reacting to things as they're happening in our environment, even as adults, right? Kids don't have the brains that we have, right? Our brains are much more developed as adults than they are as kids. So when a kid is reacting to something, when they're exhibiting a certain behavior, it's usually because something else is going on, right? I don't believe that they're just bad kids altogether. I think there's something that's happening. Similarly, when we're experiencing something, when we're noticing something that's happening in us, right, that indicates that we may need help, it is our body telling us, look, I can't manage this on my own anymore, right? I don't have the skills to manage this on my own, so I need to get some help. It's as if my foot was broken. It's as if my hand was broken. I need to get some help right now. You're not going to turn me away from going to the hospital or tell me to just drink some tea if my arm is broken. You're going to take me to the ER and we're going to go to the doc and see what needs to be done. If I'm saying to you that I can't manage being in the classroom, if I'm saying to you that it's hard for me to sleep at night, if I'm saying to you that I'm sad, I'm thinking about killing myself, it's not about just pulling up your bootstraps or go and sit in a corner or go talk to the pastor for a little bit. You're indicating that you need help. The problem is that we're not all speaking the same language, right? Because generationally, we've dealt with mental health issues differently. And so it can be hard for me to go to my parent and say to them, I'm noticing that I'm having these difficulties and I need help with it, because they're viewing that problem through their own lens. They're not seeing it through the way that advances have been made and the world is set up right now. Right? It's hearkening all the way back to that generational trauma that we spoke about, right? That I'm seeing the world in this way, And so I don't believe there's any other way to see the world that will keep us safe, right? There's also the piece that there's a stigma associated with mental illness, and that there's mistrust when it comes to the medical community and African Americans. One that is totally and absolutely sorry, I'm losing my words right here, but it, like, it's right.
It's
Just say
legitimate.
validated.
It's
Yeah,
legitimate.
It's validated.
It's totally validated, right? Because we've had
Valid.
in our past, we've had instances with the medical community where they've broken our trust, right?
Especially with Black women. I'm sorry. Notoriously.
I wasn't even there. I'm talking about like the Tuskegee study, right? Where we were infected with, where Black people were infected with syphilis and didn't even know and didn't even receive treatment for it, right? To this day, where we're talking about Black women are extraordinarily dying in childbirth or with medical issues because doctors are not listening to them.
COVID
right now. I'm sorry, say that again.
COVID.
Absolutely, even with COVID, as we're dealing with it, right? That people in our communities are dying at an exponentially higher rate, right?
Yeah.
So there's a general mistrust of the medical community. I fall into the medical community. Even though I look like y'all, I share the same skin as y'all, there are people who will not come to see me because they don't trust the system that I am involved in.
Yeah.
Right? So going to your parent who knows about the Tuskegee experiment, or who may not know, but it was passed down generationally to them, asking them to go see a doctor to talk about issues that are invisible seems preposterous. Mm-hmm. Why would I pay money for that? Doesn't make any sense, right?
And you mentioned something early on before we jumped on, as far as like the value is missing from getting help for mental health and mental.
Absolutely, right? I was saying to Nicole earlier, it's one of the first things that's probably going to go, right? That people aren't going to be willing to continue to pay for, because again, it's invisible. You can't see it, right? You know how you operate. You may realize that after seeing me for a while, you operate differently, but it's not necessarily broadcast across your forehead. Yet, when your arm is broken, we can take x-rays, we can see it. You're in a sling. I know you're in a sling first. I'm sorry?
An itemized bill, you know.
Exactly. You know exactly what's going on, and I can see it physically. This I cannot see physically, and it doesn't feel as real just because of that, right? So the value isn't necessarily there, and it hasn't been there for a significant portion of time. The one hope that I'm seeing, though, is that people are talking about it more openly within our community, right? There's more of a willingness to express that this is something that I'm going through, right? And so because of that, people are becoming more open to talk about it, right? More open to seeking out help for it, right? The other problem is that if you don't have insurance, it's very difficult if you have insurance, it's very difficult to find a therapist. If you don't have insurance, it's very difficult to find a therapist, because maybe you might not even be able to afford it, right? And so on my end, my community's end, right, psychologists end, we have to do a better job of making ourselves accessible to communities who aren't able to afford our regular fees, right? Whether it's reducing a fee, whether it's coming on a sliding scale or something like that, or whether it's doing pro bono work, but there has to be a willingness, if we want to see a change in the way that we are perceived, to go out and do more of that volunteer work to make sure that people in those communities see the value in it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's two-sided when you're talking about people seeking help. It's about what my fraternity can do, what the
psychologists.
Yeah, the psychologists can do, and then what the community can do as well. But it's, again, like, I think like everything that we've been talking about so far, there's so much complexity to it.
Absolutely. Yes, Gideon?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on something both what Jarell said and what Nas said. You know, part of the trauma as well is that we can never just succeed. As Black men, you can never just succeed. You have so much pressure on you that when you succeed, you have to go back in the community, rightfully so. But even what Jarell just was saying, that you can't just be a therapist. You have to be a therapist and then take on more work while taking care of your family, while dealing with social, political, police issues. But you have to give back the community, because you have to try and help lift as many people as you can up while you're there. But that in itself adds a whole nother level of trauma. When I was just saying earlier, when he was talking about, you know, giving back to the community, and I have to give back and I have to do this. Like, as young Black men, what do we do to really relax? And when we relax, is your mind ever really relaxing? Because you're like, man, how am I going to help these people? Because I have to, because there are not a lot of people like me trying to help them. So that adds another level of trauma itself. So it can be like a cyclical thing that unfortunately is something we need to do, but until we get more people on our team to lighten the load, it's a cycle that keeps continuing also.
Yeah, and I think, you know, some of the solutions are, and I think we touched on this very briefly, the systems being put in place to support the needs are going to be very important, especially on the grassroots level, you know, whether it's like, you know, the mental health community on the expert side, creating more resources and making it more accessible so that there are more, you know, resources that we can grasp and understand and learn. Like, there's not just one therapy, you know, one kind of therapy that fits all, you know, figure out what you need. And, you know, like, because if I didn't take the time to learn and research and things like that, I'd be unaware. You know, I think that's where our biggest problem is hinged on, to Jarell's point of earlier, of like, there's just an unawareness that shouldn't, you know, that could be starting to slowly but surely be eradicated by conversations coming together, making ourselves accessible, not necessarily overreaching or like, you know, giving so much that there's nothing, that the goal seems unattainable, but like in small little bite-sized pieces, I think that we can begin, which is step one, right? Like, even with this video and conversations of like, oh, I never seen a psychologist like Jarell. Oh, Nas is over here too. Like, he throws parties, he's cool, he does it, like, and he works, you know, in therapy, he's a therapist. Like, it's like having all of these resources and tidbits to understand that it's not, having mental wellness is not unattainable for our community. And these are the things that have kept us stuck in where we've been for eons. I think that's going to be a little, you know, drop in the water, however small, you know, to kind of like move us, just to piggyback, you know, answer your question, Gideon.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I know we're pushing an hour right now.
Yeah.
So as closing statements, I would love for you guys to describe to me your utopia, where if we all start learning, if it starts with just learning, like how we just described, having the resources and the understanding and becoming more aware, where do you see our community grow and flourish?
I guess I'll kind of start, and I just want to start off with saying I really like y'all. Like, y'all some good people, man. You know, I feel like I could talk to you guys all day, you know, and I just met y'all, man. But this conversation has been therapeutic, and also I feel like I'm being seen, you know. Like, Gideon struck a chord with his last statement in regards to success, right? And then the first thing that came to my mind was survivor's remorse. Because it's like, we all, you know, like, that's a huge word, and that's something I constantly, you know, battle with. Like, I feel like I have to, no matter how much I do for my community, or, you know, for the people that look like me, I'm not doing enough, and it brings another level of stress, you know, into my life. So, you know, but to, I guess, kind of sum up everything in regards to, for me, this is a complex, you know, conversation, you know, for the most part, but sometimes it could be very simple. You know, Gideon said early, like initially he said, which I thought was profound, the way he said it. He was like, yo, I go to therapy every Friday. He said it extremely casual, right? Like, and if he wasn't paying attention, you'll miss it, but it's like normal to him. Like, he said it as if like he goes to the gym. Like, yeah, I go every Friday, you know, every other Friday, whatever, you know, so like that, and with me hearing that, like, let's say, you know, I wasn't put up on therapy, or not therapy, counseling yet, or I was still on the fence, I would see and hear someone like Gideon that I you know, more than likely would look up to and respect as a man, and hear him say like he's going to, you know, every Friday. I'd be like, you know what, if he's doing it, like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it, you know, fuck it, like, yo. And then be like, yo, Gideon, yo, like, can you school me through this? You know, can you help me? Because at that point, the trust is there, it's initiated, and the support will be established. So, you know, it could be that simple from time to time. So yeah, like, and lastly, just everyone doing their part, no matter how small, no matter how big, just doing your part. And once you get the buy-in from someone else, you know, empower them to do their part.
Yes.
Right. And then hopefully it could just trickle on and trickle on and trickle on.
That's beautiful. So for you, Nas, like, it's community and making sure that open dialogue is continued between brothers.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
How about you, Jarell?
If I'm being 100% honest, like, this is a beginning. This conversation is the beginning of a utopia for me, because I feel like what it does is it's brought together people from different backgrounds with different experiences to talk about how we do our part in helping to uplift our own communities, right? That it's not just about my experience, but I'm taking what I know and I'm bringing it to the table so that you guys have the knowledge and you can apply it appropriately where you see fit, right? And that each of you are doing the exact same thing for me. So I'm now richer as a result of having this conversation. And there's no telling how many lives just the four of us are going to touch with the information that we have and how we begin to affect change, right? It's almost like
The butterfly effect.
like
the butterfly effect.
Butterfly effect, right? Like I'm sorry, I can't find any words tonight because it's been a long week, but like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're taking what we now know and we're richer for it and we're applying it within our communities. And what we're causing is change just within that, right?
Yes.
What I would love for us to be able to do is to have this on a grander scale, not necessarily just like all four of us or like this platform, but be able to have people in different communities in different geographical locations sit down and be able to talk like this and be able to work stuff out so that we can go back as representatives of our communities and like pour into them what we have, right? Because it's like new waters, new knowledge. It's like giving back to them, right? And ultimately what I want to be able to see, like, is just our upliftment in whatever way, shape, and form that takes. But I want to see us at a place where like healing can begin,
Yes.
where we can address what has happened and put that on the table. And even if nobody else acknowledges it, we're acknowledging it for ourselves, and we are healing within our community, and we are giving to ourselves, because that's what we need. We're so focused on giving to everybody else, but we need it the most, and you can't pour water from a dry well.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
How about you, Gideon?
I think what you guys both said, plus just a lot of unlearning. I feel like the more we unlearn the bad things we were taught, because in the grand scheme of things, the people who have raised us did the best they could with the tools that they were given. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of times we hold on to hurts, or we say, oh, mom, you didn't do enough for me, or dad, you didn't do enough for me. But the reality is they did the best with the tools they were given. So I think once you get to a certain age, you have to be adult enough to want to unlearn the bad things that your parents per se taught you, and then relearn in a positive way to make your life more attainable to the goals you want, so you can then set up generational wealth, generational success, instead of generational curses. For me, how I helped myself, and I started reading books by Don Miguel Ruiz. One of the two of the best books I ever read were The Four Agreements and The Mastery of Love, and they helped me unlearn so many bad habits that I had learned, and not blaming the people who taught me those habits. You just did the best with what you had. And I love you for that. I love you for getting me to this point. Now it's up to me to take on the learning aspect as an adult and move forward and unlearn those things and move forward and help as many people as I can along my journey. So in my utopia, I feel like you both said, if we have bigger forums like this, where people can tell their genuine stories of hurt and pain, how they overcame them, and how they're working to constantly overcome them so it doesn't make them backslide into a space where they're angry and upset and not being a useful member to society, or even a useful member to themselves, feeling those feelings of depression and wanting to commit suicide and not even being here, and educating ourselves so that when we are in spaces where we are the only people of color, we can articulate it in a way that we can let our non-POC counterparts really empathize with us and feel with us, and know it's not our responsibility to educate them, because we are educated about their way of life every day, and we're taught it in history, even though a lot of it is lies. But we have to figure out a way in that utopia of how to let them into our world so they understand, like, we're not making this up. We have to deal with 3 different ways of living every time we step outside the house. And I think once they use their privilege to help us get the message out there further, the utopia will genuinely and organically start to happen.
Well, my Black brothers, thank you so much for taking the time out and having this very important conversation. I look forward to the lives that you guys are going to touch with your amazing words and of advice and tools that you were able to provide for everybody. I can't wait till we're all free and social so I can meet y'all in person. But with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this We Heart Our Livers. And tune in. There's going to be plenty more that you can learn from.
Awesome. Peace.
Don't hang up.